something is shaking the foundations of Western power in Africa. It isn't a new president. It's not a protest movement. It's a revolution, and it's wearing military fatigues. From Mali to Guinea, Burkina Faso to Niger, a wave of coups between 2020 and 2023 has flipped the political chessboard. And at the center of this uprising, defying empires old and new, is a man whose name now echoes across the continent like a battle cry: Captain Ibrahim Traoré. He is not just a soldier. He is a storm. Loved by millions of young Africans, feared by Western elites, and targeted by assassination plots, Traoré is leading one of the boldest political awakenings of the 21st century. His rise is not just a story of power, but of purpose. It's a fight for dignity, self-determination, and freedom from neo-colonial chains. To understand why Traoré is shaking palaces in Paris and rattling halls in Washington, we need to go back to where it all began. The year was 1960. As Africa rose from the ashes of colonialism, Upper Volta, now known as Burkina Faso, claimed its independence from France. But the victory was bittersweet. The French may have lowered their flag, but their influence stayed wrapped around the new republic like a vice. Maurice Umiogo, the first president, wasted no time tightening his grip on power. He banned opposition, built a one-party state, and surrounded himself with French advisors. His administration sank into corruption and extravagance while his people starved. By 1966, the people had had enough. Strikes erupted, protests spread, and the military stepped in. Lieutenant Colonel Sango Lamazana seized power in a coup, placing Umiogo under house arrest. Once again, hope surged. Once again, they would be crushed. Lamazana, too, would cling to power for over a decade, cycling between constitutions, coups, and referendums. The faces changed. The suffering did not. But in the midst of that chaos, something else was born: a flame. In a young cadet named Thomas Sankara, that flame would become a fire. He studied revolutionary ideas, Marxist theory, anti-imperialist politics. When he returned to his homeland after military training abroad, he wasn't just a soldier, he was a visionary. By 1983, at only 33 years old, Sankara led a coup of his own, not for power, but for justice. As president, he launched a revolution the world hadn't seen before. Mass vaccinations, reforestation campaigns, anti-corruption crackdowns, women's emancipation, and economic independence from foreign powers. He renamed the country Burkina Faso, meaning land of upright people. But that defiance came at a cost. Foreign powers grew nervous. Regional elites felt threatened. And in 1987, the unthinkable happened. His closest ally, Blaise Compaoré, betrayed him. Backed by foreign interests, Compaoré staged a coup, assassinating Sankara and extinguishing the most hopeful era in the country's post-colonial history. Compaoré would rule for 27 years, gutting everything Sankara had built. He welcomed back Western donors, courted the IMF, and violently suppressed dissent. While the elites got richer, the people endured more pain. And then, in 1988, just 5 months after Sankara's assassination, Ibrahim Traoré was born. He came from a modest family in the west of Burkina Faso. He grew up surrounded by poverty, betrayal, and the fading echoes of Sankara's dream. As a young man, he joined the army, not for prestige, but with a desire to serve and defend his homeland. By 2009, Traoré was enlisted. He trained as an officer and specialized in anti-aircraft defense. His battlefield education came not in drills, but in live combat against jihadist insurgents in northern Mali and eastern Burkina Faso. He watched as his fellow soldiers fought with outdated weapons while officials in the capital indulged in luxury and corruption. Traoré wasn't just angry, he was awake. He quietly emerged as a voice among the junior officers, rallying those who had grown disillusioned with the government's failure to protect the people. The final spark came in 2022, after another failed leadership shuffle and yet another deadly ambush left soldiers and civilians massacred in the north. On September 30, 2022, Traoré led a second coup in just 8 months, removing Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba and taking control. The takeover was fast and precise. By October 2nd, he was officially declared transitional president, at just 34 years old. But what happened next defied every expectation. From the very first day in office, Captain Ibrahim Traoré made one thing crystal clear: this was not business as usual. He wasn't looking for titles. He didn't ask for promotions. Unlike most coup leaders who anoint themselves as generals overnight, Traoré remained a captain, the same rank he held when he took power. He also refused his presidential salary, a gesture meant to send a message to every corner of the country. This is not about privilege, it's about purpose. His focus: security, survival, sovereignty. Wearing his now iconic red beret and often seen in fatigues, Traoré projected the image of a man at war, not just with terrorists, but with everything holding Burkina Faso back: foreign interference, elite corruption, and decades of dependency. In October 2022, just weeks into his rule, he launched a bold national initiative, an enlistment campaign to recruit 50,000 civilian volunteers into local defense units. These weren't just symbolic gestures. They were community warriors, everyday people trained to defend their villages from extremist incursions. The response was overwhelming. Thousands across the country answered the call. This wasn't just about filling out the ranks, it was about taking ownership of the country's fate. And Traoré wasn't just fighting with guns. He opened a second front in the economic war, a war for control over Burkina Faso's most valuable resource: gold. You see, Burkina Faso is the 15th largest gold producer in the world. And yet, for decades, most of that gold left the country unprocessed, funneled into foreign-owned operations or smuggled through black markets, often with the silent blessing of those in power. Traoré said no more. In November 2023, his government approved the construction of the country's first state-run gold refinery. This was more than a factory. It was a statement. Burkina Faso would no longer be a colony of extraction. The refinery would create jobs, increase state revenue, and ensure that more of the country's wealth stayed within its borders. Just a few months later, in February 2024, the government suspended export permits for small-scale gold miners. The goal: crush illegal smuggling networks and tighten control over the nation's most exploited sector. But shaking up the status quo has a price. Western powers, especially France and the United States, were not happy. Not long after these economic moves, reports began to circulate. Multiple assassination attempts had been made on Traoré's life. He doubled down on security, reshuffled his inner circle, and kept moving, undaunted. And as he fought these external and internal battles, Traoré was also redrawing the map of West African geopolitics. First, he cut ties with France, the former colonial ruler whose presence in Burkina Faso had long sparked resentment. In January 2023, his administration formally requested the withdrawal of French troops. By February, every French soldier was gone. The French ambassador was expelled. French-funded media outlets were shut down. It was the end of an era. For many in Burkina Faso, it felt like independence, real independence, for the very first time. With France out, Traoré turned to new alliances. He strengthened bonds with Mali and Niger, two fellow Sahel countries that, like Burkina Faso, were now governed by military regimes following coups. They shared more than geography. They shared a mission: to reclaim sovereignty, fight terrorism, and reject foreign dictates. When the West African regional bloc ECOWAS threatened military intervention in Niger after its 2023 coup, Burkina Faso and Mali responded swiftly. Any such move would be treated as an act of war. This wasn't just defiance. It was the beginning of a new coalition. In July 2024, Traoré helped formalize the Alliance of Sahel States, a powerful new tripartite pact between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Focused on mutual defense, economic cooperation, and resisting foreign interference, it marked a tectonic shift in West Africa's power structure. But Traoré wasn't only looking regionally. On the global stage, he reached out to Russia, building security partnerships to fill the void left by France. His government also deepened ties with China, Algeria, and other emerging powers. At home, he struck a chord with a new generation of Africans who saw in him the spirit of Thomas Sankara reborn: uncompromising, idealistic, and unafraid to speak hard truths to global powers. But Traoré has made one thing painfully clear: this is not about nostalgia. It's about unfinished business. Burkina Faso, under his leadership, is not seeking permission to be free. It's acting like it already is. And while Western diplomats whisper, plot, and pressure, the people are watching. The streets are watching. Africa is watching. Because in the eyes of many, Ibrahim Traoré is not just another soldier in power. He is the embodiment of a new era. But for Traoré, This mission isn't only about defending borders or reclaiming gold, it's about redefining the soul of Burkina Faso. His administration has repeatedly invoked the principles of self-determination and Pan-African unity. Official statements speak with the language of liberation, not the kind written in peace treaties, but the kind fought for on the battlefield and in the trenches of poverty, corruption, and forgotten villages. And just like Sankara before him, Traoré's fight is as cultural as it is political. He's dismantling the symbols of neo-colonialism. From booting out foreign military bases, to ending dependency on Western media, to promoting national ownership of natural resources, every move sends the same message: Burkina Faso belongs to Burkinabe. But that resistance to foreign control comes at a high cost. Relations with the United States and the European Union have grown colder. Development aid has slowed. Military cooperation, once a cornerstone of Burkina Faso's counterterrorism strategy, has been scaled back or suspended. Western-backed institutions have voiced concern about the direction of governance. Yet for Traoré and his supporters, this isolation is not a setback, it's validation. It proves the country is finally breaking away from the system that kept it trapped in dependence. A system that demanded elections but ignored economic justice. A system that offered aid but extracted wealth. A system that shook hands in public while undermining sovereignty in private. Traoré's Burkina Faso has turned that system on its head. And he is not standing alone. In Mali, Assimi Goïta has taken similar steps, kicking out the French, pursuing Russian cooperation, and aligning with Traoré's anti-imperialist vision. In Niger, after the July 2023 coup, Abdourahmane Tiani followed suit, joining the movement against ECOWAS intervention and Western pressure. Together, these three leaders are forging what many now call a Sahelian bloc of resistance, one with shared ideology, military solidarity, and a burning desire to reimagine Africa's place in the world. But beyond geopolitics, Traoré is deeply aware of the war at home. The war against extremists, yes, but also the war against despair, division, and the long shadow of betrayal that has haunted Burkina Faso since the day Thomas Sankara fell. He visits front lines. He addresses soldiers not as a distant ruler, but as one of their own. He tells villagers not to wait for the West to save them, but to rise, organize, and fight. His speeches are rare, but when he speaks, the words ripple through the country with conviction. No more negotiation with terrorists. No more exploitation by elites. No more manipulation by outsiders. This message has earned him devotion and danger in equal measure. His motorcade has been targeted. His life has been threatened. Whispers of plots, sabotage, and infiltration swirl around him constantly. But still, he marches on, more determined, more guarded, more dangerous to the status quo. And perhaps that's what makes Captain Ibrahim Traoré such a singular figure in African politics today. He is not a placeholder. He is not a puppet. He is not another uniformed strongman mouthing slogans while looting the treasury. He is, in the eyes of many, a continuation of a revolution that was cut short in 1987, one buried with Sankara but never forgotten. This is the revolution reborn. And it's no longer asking for permission. Across the villages, the mountains, and the parched plains of Burkina Faso, something has shifted. It's not just the presence of soldiers. It's not just the echo of gunfire in the north. It's the awakening of a national spirit that had long been silenced. Every speech Traoré gives now lands like a manifesto. He doesn't offer false hope. He speaks of sacrifice, of blood, of reclaiming dignity, not just for his country, but for all of Africa. And the continent is listening. From Senegal to Sudan, Ghana to the Congo, young Africans are reposting his videos, quoting his words, waving his image alongside Sankara's. Not because they want more coups, but because they want more courage. More leaders who speak to them, not at them. More action, less pretense. More ownership, less begging. Traoré's message is dangerous, not because it's violent, but because it's liberating. He is telling Africa that it has everything it needs, that what colonialism broke can be rebuilt, not with charity, but with resolve. Meanwhile, the international order, so used to managing and manipulating post-colonial states through a cocktail of diplomacy, debt, and soft power, is struggling to respond. Sanctions haven't worked. Pressure has backfired. Assassination attempts have only bolstered his popularity. Burkina Faso, under Traoré, isn't asking to sit at the table anymore. It's building a new one. And with the formation of the Alliance of Sahel states, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are no longer isolated juntas. They're a unified front. They've rejected ECOWAS. They've rejected French military aid. They've begun forging their own trade agreements, sharing intelligence, and coordinating military operations. Together, they're building a model that says African problems don't need foreign solutions, they need African leadership. Traore has embraced this role not just as a national leader, but as a continental symbol. He rarely grants interviews. He speaks with deliberate calm, not political theater. He doesn't make promises he can't keep. Instead, he speaks in terms of generations, of planting seeds whose fruit he may never live to see. And that, more than anything, unnerves his enemies. Because it's not just what Traore is doing, it's what he represents. A new kind of leadership, a new kind of patriotism, a new kind of war, one fought not just with rifles, but with righteous defiance. And that war is being waged in every dusty town where volunteers are picking up arms to defend their families. In every policy that wrests control from foreign mining companies. In every speech that dares to say what so many have only whispered. That Africa is rising, not as a servant, but as a sovereign. And Ibrahim Traoré, he's not just part of that rise. He may be the spark setting it all ablaze. But for all the regional alliances and defiant speeches on global stages, Traoré's true battleground is still at home. The war against insurgents remains fierce. Extremist groups, some with links to Al-Qaeda, others to ISIS, have rooted themselves in the countryside, exploiting poverty, marginalization, and state neglect. Villages have been burned, markets bombed, children orphaned. For years, previous governments threw up their hands, claimed helplessness, or outsourced the fight to foreign soldiers. Traoré has refused that narrative. In his Burkina Faso, there is no surrender. Under his directive, not only were tens of thousands of civilian volunteers mobilized, but the army itself was restructured for agility and battlefield efficiency. Corrupt officers were quietly removed. Resources were redirected to frontline units. Supply lines that had once failed soldiers were reinforced. But Traoré's war isn't just one of bullets and battle plans. He knows that for security to last, the state must return to places it abandoned. So under his administration, local governance has been revived in zones previously left to rot. New schools, mobile clinics, and community radio stations have popped up in conflict-hit areas. It's not flashy. It's not televised. But to the people living under fear, it's revolutionary. In a land where politicians once spoke in French to foreign donors, Traoré now speaks in Mossi to his own people, and they hear him. Young people, especially, see themselves in him. Not because of his age, but because of his defiance. His refusal to follow the script. In an Africa filled with aging leaders clinging to colonial-era frameworks, Traoré is a rupture in the narrative. And that rupture is spreading. Universities across the continent now debate his policies. Activist circles cite his speeches alongside Frantz Fanon and Patrice Lumumba. Student groups paint murals of him next to Sankara and Che Guevara. It's not just admiration. It's identification. Because what he's fighting against, foreign domination, elite greed, manufactured dependency, is a war every African knows, even if they don't wear a uniform. But with admiration also comes expectation. Traoré is not only being watched by his enemies. He is being watched by his own people, closely. They do not want another false dawn. They've lived through decades of broken promises, leaders who rose as reformers and died as tyrants. Traoré walks a razor's edge. He must deliver, on security, on sovereignty, on justice, while holding off foreign pressure, internal sabotage, and the corrosive temptations of power. And so far, he's taken the hard path, not consolidating for comfort, but decentralizing for survival. Not enriching himself, but investing in the people. Still, no one is under any illusion. The forces aligned against him are vast. They are well-funded. And they are patient. He has rattled the cages of long-standing colonial arrangements, exposed exploitative economic systems, and threatened to inspire a continent-wide awakening. So his survival is not guaranteed. But his impact, that's already been felt. In the dusty streets of Ouagadougou, the murals of Sankara now sit beside a new face, young, stern-eyed, beret tilted forward. Underneath are scrawled words that have become a chant, a challenge, a prophecy. La patrie ou la mort. We shall overcome. Across Africa, the youth are restless and ready. They make up more than 60% of the continent's population. They inherit nations rich in minerals but poor in opportunity. They see their futures mortgaged to foreign debt, their leaders genuflecting to IMF officials, their natural wealth shipped out while schools crumble and hospitals decay. For years, their rage simmered in silence, in private conversations, in whispered doubts about democracy that never delivers. But something changed when Ibrahim Traoré stepped forward, not as a polished politician or foreign-educated economist, but as a battle-hardened soldier with fire in his eyes and Sankara's ghost at his back. His words were not scripted. His tone was not polished. But his message rang like a gunshot in the heart of a generation. No one will save us but ourselves. From Dakar to Dar es Salaam, youth movements took notice. In Senegal, where young activists have battled elite corruption and political repression, Traoré is viewed not as a role model, but as proof that radical change is possible. In Nigeria, where students protest fuel hikes while oil is exported by the ton, his critique of neo-colonialism finds fertile ground. In South Africa, where inequality runs deep despite decades of freedom, youth-led groups cite Traoré when calling for economic emancipation, not just electoral politics. What they see in him is not perfection, it's permission. Permission to question systems inherited from colonial masters. Permission to reject democracy if it means only the freedom to starve under the watch of polite tyrants. Permission to reclaim the language of revolution, not as nostalgia, but as necessity. Online, hashtag Ibrahim Traoré trends often alongside hashtag Sankara Lives. His speeches are clipped into TikTok montages, his photos turned into posters, his stance into symbols. A new political language is forming, and it doesn't seek Western validation. But while youth movements across Africa are electrified, Western media is bewildered, often bordering on hostile. The headlines are predictable. Burkina Faso slips into authoritarianism. Military strongman tightens grip. Another blow to democracy in Africa. And while it's true that Burkina Faso is under military rule, these portrayals often flatten the story, omitting the context of decades of elite betrayal, failed interventions, and puppet regimes that answered to Paris before Ouagadougou. Rarely do they ask, why are the people cheering a captain in combat boots rather than a man in a suit? Rarely do they wonder, what makes this coup leader more popular than the elected presidents before him? Instead, Traoré is framed as a threat to regional stability, a challenge to Western interests, a risk to foreign investment. But perhaps that's the most telling part. Because for a system built on control, sovereignty looks like chaos. For those profiting from dependency, self-reliance looks like rebellion. And for former empires who never truly left, Traoré looks like a ghost from the past, one they thought they buried in 1987. Yet here he is, young, undefeated, and not begging for approval. While Western analysts fumble for frameworks, African youth are forging something new, something raw, untested, and unfinished, but undeniably theirs. They don't want stability that means stagnation. They don't want democracy that delivers despair. They want dignity. They want power. And if Traoré, for all his flaws and risks, is a vessel for that, then so be it. He may not be the answer, but he is a signal that the questions have changed. In conclusion, Burkina Faso is not just fighting a war against terror. It is fighting a war for its soul. In Ibrahim Traoré, many see not just a man, but a mirror, reflecting the pain of generations past and the hope of generations to come. He carries the unfinished dreams of Thomas Sankara, the fury of the forgotten, and the burden of a continent told for too long that it could not stand on its own. His revolution is raw. It is imperfect, but it is real. And whether he succeeds or fails, one truth is now undeniable. Africa is no longer asking for freedom. It is reclaiming it. Young people across the continent are watching Traoré's rise, not with blind admiration, but with burning purpose. They are learning that it is not treason to question the systems that failed them. It is not dangerous to demand sovereignty, it is necessary. Because if one soldier, from a small forgotten village, can rise and challenge empires, what can millions do? This is more than Burkina Faso's story. This is our story. Yours. Mine. Africa's. If this story moved you, if you felt the fire of Sankara's spirit, if you believe Africa deserves leaders who serve instead of steal, then don't let this message fade into the algorithm. Subscribe to this channel. Like this video. Share it with your friends, your family, your community, because stories like this are being silenced, and we will not be silent anymore. Every click, every share, every comment is an act of resistance, of remembrance. For Sankara. For Traore. For every voice rising from the ashes, shouting, La patrie ou la mort. We shall overcome. Let them hear us. Let the revolution be televised.